In our last lecture, we took a look at the opening for the election of 1896, and we found that it was an interesting year for an election with the Populists picking the same candidate as the Democrats, and in the end, losing to the Republicans. William McKinley becomes president of the United States. But that's not the end story for populism. So I've titled this very short lecture, the brief lecture, Populism Loses and Wins. Our target is 6.03. William Jennings Bryan really excited farmers and Democrats with his electrifying cross of gold speech. He recorded it later. It was so popular so people could listen to it over and over again. And it aroused a lot of commentary from folks. Is Bryan, using images from the Bible in a really, really bad way? Is this sacrilegious? This cartoonist seems to think so, that Bryan has borrowed from the cross of Jesus and Jesus's crown of thorns and is almost prostituting them to politics. Other people were electrified by this speech about not crucifying mankind on a cross of gold. In the end of it, though, it didn't help Bryan win. So we have to figure out, why does populism lose this election? For one thing, we can say that the Democrats stole the populist message. And that made it difficult for populists to figure out, do I vote in this election? Is Bryan really one of us? Democrats themselves are looking at Bryan going, he's talking like a populist. And even though his language certainly electrified people, at the end of the day, can you trust this guy who seems to have his foot in both political ideas, both political parties? Southern populism was damaged by racism. Southern populists attempted to create a biracial populist movement, invite black farmers to be with white farmers politically. And Southern Democrats said, oh, hell no, you aren't doing that. And so Southerners saw a wave of racist actions against populists, against African Americans in the South, a wave of violence, a wave of propaganda designed to heighten racism. There is even just 2 years after the Populists lost in 1896, a race riot in Wilmington, North Carolina, which illustrates just the depth of Southern racism at the possibility that black and white people could even work together. Urban voters didn't sign on to the populist movement either. Many of them were afraid of expanding the money supply. They were worried that if the populists got what they wanted with free silver, money would lose its value and it would make it more expensive to buy products in cities. Some of these city workers were frightened into thinking that the populist victory would damage their livelihoods, their jobs, and their abilities to feed their families. And so labor did not embrace populism. Urban workers did not say, yay, populism. However, the story doesn't end there. Just because the populists lost in 1896 and again in 1900 doesn't mean that they don't have victories in the end. Those victories come later. For example, the populists had demanded an income tax. There will be one in 1913. It's coming, just not in 1896 or 7 or 8. The populists demanded the direct election of senators. That is going to come by 1913 as well. So we just have to wait a little while for the things that the populists want to get enacted. The populists had demanded a secret ballot, and many states enact the secret ballot in the 1890s and 1900s, which responds to what the populists wanted. So even though the populists don't win the election, they do announce policies that eventually will become part of the United States. So they kind of win in the long term. Here's an example of the racist legacy of populism uh, trying to put together African American farm workers and populists together. Um, Black people get painted as demonic, as evil. And ads like this are used to encourage Southern Democrats to vote against anything that would enable Black people to have a political voice in the populist movement in North Carolina and indeed the rest of the South as well. But in the immediate term, however, it's gold that triumphs. Because in the United States in 1900, Congress passes the Gold Standard Act that commits the American money supply to gold. So goodbye free silver and the hope of an inflated money supply, as gold now stands triumphant, sound money with a stable value will trump the promise of an expanded but cheaper money.